Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to design your life according to your values.
I'm really excited about this one and curious as well. It's a big topic. Values, like you said off camera,
Yeah,
these are it's like close to your heart, right? These
right,
are the things that are truly important to you, and at the same time, it's like they're they're, they're only yours. They're nobody else's. These
right,
values are yours that you choose, just like you choose an ice cream.
right. And I would, okay, all right, Mr. Slick.
I got you on that one, didn't I?
All right, so I would say that every person absolutely has to start designing their life according to their values. And that is a total conversion. Like everything in your life is going to be changed from this. It happens. It depends on the people you're going to be with, the things you're going to do. I think that's all of life, isn't it? The people you're going to be with and the things you're going to do. It's okay. I every good
Yeah.
thing comes in threes, but I only had two. So, and that actually ties into energy because align, values and energy is interconnected because when you follow your values and you design your life from your values, you get more energy, and when you don't do it, you lose energy. And so, and it comes back to the to unconscious behaviors that we talked about in the last episode um, because what will stop you from living according to your values is unconscious behaviors that make you do things that are not in alignment with your values. And so Jonathan talked about an exercise to find your values, and whatever way you discover your values through, there are different ways to do so. You can even Google it. The very fact that you try is going to lead you there one way or another. You don't have to be specific. But once you start looking at your values, you can start to organize your life from these values. And if you haven't done this, a lot of in your life is going to change. But if you don't do this, there's going to be so many things in your life that are blocking your energy because there's going to be situations and people who are not in alignment with your values. For example, let's say you're a person who believes in treating other people well, and you have a friend or you have a friend in one of your friend circles who thinks it's funny to treat people badly. Like that's going to affect your energy because whenever you're with that person, they're going to put your energy downwards because your energy, your frequency of vibration is very different from theirs. If they are okay with treating people badly and you don't believe in treating people badly, then if you tolerate this person, that is going to damage your energy and it's going to damage your own self-esteem and your adherence to your own values. Now there may be situations in which you don't have control over whether a person is in your environment or not. That's fine. But if a person is voluntarily in your environment and you're not speaking up when they're doing things you're not okay with, or you're not choosing to not be with this person, then it's going to damage your energy, your happiness, and it's going to damage your own self esteem because you're not living according to your values by, for example, letting someone in your friend group treat other people in your friend group badly. So one way to live, to design your life according to your values is to start looking at the people in your life. Do they match your values? They may also bring other values, but do they match your values? Or do they break your values? Do they take your energy? Do they give you energy? So that's the first thing that I would bring up in terms of life design and values. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
I think it's a really important thing to kind of start up this conversation around gives energy and takes away energy. I just want
Right.
to say like it can be really really challenging to kind of to stand up to other people. Like
Right.
you mentioned the friend group thing, right? And what came up with me is like, well, that was my whole youth,
Right.
and at the same time, like I knew that that wasn't in alignment with myself. Like I've always been somebody that's saw good in other people or wanted good in other people, and that really hurt me actually to see other people
It
just
does. And it hurts
like,
your estimation of yourself that you're a silent participant in it.
and that I allowed them to get away with that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I actually really admired my father for some of the courage that he had when he saw people behaving out of line. He would call them out, and he was a, yeah, you could say intimidating in some way in his physical shape, but like, but actually he would consciously just say to them like, that's not it, that's not appropriate, that's not in line, like
I love that. I love
that's
that.
not on kind of thing. And
I
I
love
think
that.
we, and something we can kind of learn from that is just to kind of, if we do have something that's important to us and we notice in our environment, or notice maybe actually it's coming from ourselves sometimes as well, maybe we're just reacting to something emotionally, to kind of say, okay, hang on a second, take a step back and say, like, is this really how I want to behave? Is this really, does this really kind of align with myself and my values right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanna add to about this speaking up. If you live according to your values, even when your legs are trembling, your knees are weak, you're sweating, and your voice is small and squeaky, even if you follow your values even in that situation, and you don't look like much when you do it, if you keep doing that, there's going to be one day where you're not going to be shaking anymore, where your voice is going to ring through loud and clear, and you're going to be sure of yourself, of your values. The only thing it takes is that you stay on that path. You don't have to be cool or strong or intimidating or anything. You just have to be persistent and to be willing to be a trembling mess, but one who sticks to your own truth. If you can do that, then one day all that's left is the truth and you won't be shaking anymore.
I love that. There's so much truth in that, and we all know that feeling when we're, maybe speaking up in an audience of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Myself, that happens all the time, and somebody, the host says like, "Does anyone have a question?" And you're like, you have a question, and that's important to you, but you don't say anything because of that fear, and then you go to
Yeah.
say something, and you're just shaking in in fear or
Yeah.
trembling. That's a good one to kind of.
And if someone is treating someone else badly and you want to stand up for them, do it. Doesn't matter if you cry or whatever. Just do it anyway. Doesn't matter if you're not looking cool. Doesn't matter if it's not impressive or you're keeping it together. If you fall apart completely doing it, still do it, because that's authentic and it's true and it's your values, and you're going to respect yourself afterwards for doing it.
So much more, and you would
You,
never know. You would never know if you never say anything.
yeah, you're not in this life to be cool. You're in this life to be true. You're in this life to be authentic. You don't have to be cool. You don't even have to make a difference. You just have to try. That's what makes a difference. Because even if you don't manage to do anything, that person knew you stood up for them, and you knew that you stood up for them and yourself. Like my whole, like in my youth, I was the one who, I ran with the crowd. I was a part of all the bad stuff, and I wasn't a good person, and I didn't stand up for myself. And when I started standing up for myself as a sensitive person in a man's world, I was shaking. My voice was shaking. I was trembling. I was talking in a squeaky voice. My voice failed me, and I cried. All these things. I did all this, but I stuck to it because it was worth doing, and it was the right thing to do. So you don't have to be cool in this life. You just have to do the right thing.
What came to me when you were saying that is like this saying of like, do you want to be a follower or a leader? And it's
Yeah.
like, it's so easy to follow the crowd, to follow
Right.
how other people are doing things, their values, how they're behaving, because they're the crowd. That's and
Yeah.
but to actually like be the leader in that situation, like you said yourself were doing, or when you are holding true to your values of being yourself, being authentic, you are actually leading your own life
Yeah.
by design, because
Yeah.
you've chosen that way, you've chosen that path, you've chosen to stand up, you've chosen to kind of um,
And
be
someone
true
will
to.
follow you. And when you become that kind of leader, even in your youth group or in your company or whatever, you're creating a space where it's okay to be vulnerable, where it's okay to be weak, where it's okay to be open, because you become the new leader of a new space where suddenly people are allowed to share who they are and to be vulnerable and to be real.
And that gives
So
space for other people to also be
yeah,
leader, and also to bring out their leadership or their
right.
values, their true self, their authentic self, because you
Right.
gave space for that, because you showed them the path. You walked that path. You showed them what it was like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I say, since we're talking about values by design, that was the what we're talking about
Right.
today. Um, Usually, what I help people kind of break it down, their values, into kind of five areas of life. So that's family or friends is one area, and then work, or if you're studying, can be another area, and then you've got like your hobbies or your downtime, your your spirituality or your religion. Was that five? Oh,
Probably.
and what do you do, like, sport, like if you fit health wise kind of thing as well.
Mm.
And so a way, not the only way, but a way of kind of looking at these values is you have different values for different areas of your life. So if you look at those five different areas, then maybe you have some values that you hold close to you for your family, and some values you hold close to you for your work can be completely different. Not completely different, but sometimes they are slightly different.
Right.
Uh, so understanding these five different areas and understanding what are your values in these different kind of parts of your life can be helpful towards designing that life you want to live through your values. But you had an idea about this. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Which about what?
Just life, like what we do, what are
Right.
we
Well,
living for?
one thing I think is people. Like, as they say, good company was a serious recommendation of the ancients. Even Buddha talked about how important good friends were, who could help you, support you, and point out your flaws. Right. So, and I think one thing we have to really be honest about is that there is a cost of opportunity with being with the wrong people. I see a lot of people who are like, well, I don't really like this relationship, but I don't have a new one ready, so I'm just gonna whatever. Or, well, I don't really like this friend, but I'm just gonna, I don't have a new friend right now waiting, so I'm just gonna stay here.
Play it
But I,
safe. They're playing it safe.
well, in a sense, yeah. And I want to say, like, um, you're probably not going to get something new in your life before you let go of the old. And that requires a little bit of trust. I know that. But the fact is, you're spending time on this person. That's time you're not going to use to meet someone new. This person is taking away your energy because they're not right for you. And that's energy you're not going to be able to share with other people, with yourself, or with a new person. There is a cost associated with hanging out with people who are not good for you. So I think and it's not just values, because sometimes, I think this is it's one of those like little life mastery rules. After you spend time with someone, do you feel energized, or have you lost energy? That is sounds like a small thing, but holy shit, you can know so much from that one thing. If someone consistently leaves you with less energy than you had, then that is very unlikely to be a good person for you. And if someone leaves you with more energy than you had, or even if you may do things together, you get tired or whatever, but if emotionally, spiritually, energetically you feel higher, then that person is actually pushing your energy upwards. And I guarantee you, so many conscious people, they wake up in a life and they find that there are a lot of people who actually take away their energy. And there are even these so-called energy vampires who who can just leave a person completely drained. So I would say, like, with a sword, cut away the wrong people in your life. And I would take it even further, and I would say, I know this, it differs on what country you're from, and there are norms and rules and culture. But just because someone is related to you by blood doesn't mean you need to have them in your life. Like, often family members are the ones who create the worst energy in a person, creates the worst thoughts, creates the worst emotions. Often family, someone either close in the family or a distant or more further out relative, become a great drain on someone's emotional and spiritual and physical well-being,
So
because
when
there's this unconscious idea that family has a special place in your life. But if someone is draining your energy, they're not meant for you. It doesn't matter who they are.
So, Torbjörn, when you notice this happening, somebody in your life draining your energy, whether it's family, friends,
Right.
colleagues, sometimes it's challenging to change the environment. And so, if those same people are, for example, family, are always going to be there, then what can you do that's still in line with your values? Because you said
Yeah.
earlier, cut out the people with the sword. But
Right.
if they're your family, it's a bit harder to do that, right? So it's
Right.
like if you notice that somebody in your family is draining energy, and yet they're a family member, what can you do?
Well, I think, and I want to hear your answer afterwards, but I think you should set boundaries and speak up for yourself and other people in whatever amount that you're comfortable with. If you have an uncle who is an asshole, then, and they're at their family gatherings or whatever, then you can call out what they do. You don't have to do it all the time, but you can do you can do whatever it is you feel like you have to do to be in alignment with your own values. Only you know what is right and wrong for you. So you should look at what is making me feel like the right version of myself, and what is making me feel like the wrong version of myself, and you'll have to balance that. But and if you're a very agreeable person, you'll have to put up um, with more people you don't like. And if you're a less disagreeable person, you can be less willing to go into situations where you know they are, or you can try to talk to the people who invite them or whatever. um, but the most important is you have to navigate it in such a way that you don't feel like you're betraying your own values and yourself and the other people involved, because it's not always about you. Sometimes the greatest betrayal that happens is you see someone else treating someone else badly. Sometimes you see one person doing something to another person, and you being a part of that, a silent participant, is actually going to hurt you, because you know you're not following your values by allowing this to happen. And then you can either do something about it in the situation, or you can simply choose to not be a part of it and say, if this is going to happen, I'm not going to be in the situation because I cannot condone this. And one very interesting thing is that conscious people are generally a lot more conscientable. What is the word? Like, they have a bigger,
Conscientious.
they're much more
That's a
conscient,
hard word to say.
conscientious.
Yeah.
So it's so, as a conscious person, you've probably already experienced that life is rough if you have a conscience and you want to follow it. And that is because there's a lot of people who are not very conscious, and you're going to have to find a way, your own personal way, person to person. It depends. Maybe you rationalize that some people are just like that and you have compassion for them. Maybe you choose to spend time with people who are treating other people properly. You'll have to find your own balance, but you must find that balance, because you live in a world where the majority of people are not very they don't
Conscious.
have they don't have a they don't consider really whether what they're doing is morally good or morally bad. And what that means in most cases is they are not particularly worried about how their actions affect another person's emotions and energy. And that's a pretty drastic way of being for a conscious person observing a situation, to disregard another person's inner experience is it's a wild thing. And that's why so many conscious people have problems in childhood, because uh, that we see a lot of that as we grow up. People really just disregarding other people's emotions completely, and it's something that you're going to have to take some kind of stand against in your own way, whether that be in a large or a small way. Because if you don't, then you'll feel on some level that you're betraying yourself, because you know this isn't right.
And your life will get smaller and smaller
Exactly.
to some extent, because you're betraying who you are deeper
Yeah.
down. You're betraying your own values, yourself, your authenticity, and also um, yeah, you're not being real with yourself, and that can really eat you alive and lead to a lot of psychological problems.
What you said was so true. Every time you make a decision that is against your values, you become smaller and smaller and smaller, and you
And so
become
one
so.
day you wake up and realize and don't recognize yourself anymore.
Yeah, one day you realize you're not even there anymore, and you
Yeah.
don't know who you are.
The crazy thing is that we all have, when we talk about spirituality or consciousness or all these kind of words, that's a part of us all, right?
Right.
It's not like some of us have it, some of us don't. Some of us are spiritual, some of us are not. To some degree, we all have that within us.
Right.
It's just that for some of us, it lays dormant. It's in the background
Right.
and not kind of brought forward.
There are those who will accept attunement and those who won't, and there are those who can be saved and those who can't. Zen Master Foyan.
Love your quotes.
And some people they're gonna be waking up in another life, and that's what that is. But we are in a time where the energy is shifting. There are more and more conscious people. So this is the time. This is not the time to mask. This is the time to speak up, because there's going to be someone else in your near vicinity who's also conscious. And if you speak up, you're going to run into them. And never, I will give you this promise. I bear witness to this. Never hold on to something thinking something better is not available. Like when Jonathan came into my life, I had let go of a dear friend, which I hope he comes back, but I let go of him for a while because he kept clinging to his energy. He didn't want to go up. He didn't want to go the same way I was going. He didn't want to let go and go up. His vibrations were being held down by certain things in his past that he was holding on to for different reasons. And so I could feel, as I was growing and he wasn't, I could feel we were getting further and further apart. When we were talking, it was harder and harder to understand each other. And at some point I was like, our energies are now destroying each other. We are no longer, our frequencies are so far apart that we are no longer compatible. And I said, we're going to have to take a break here. Um, and after I did
You
that,
actually said that out loud to him.
yeah. I just tell people how I feel and what I think if
Yeah.
they're my friends. And I think like 3 or 4 weeks after that, I ran into Jonathan and we started talking. And Jonathan, for me, and I know this can be like, this is in Danish we have an expression like it's pineapple in its own juice. But Jonathan is actually like, I've never met someone like Jonathan, someone who was so conscious and who was so, his values were so strong that even when there were possible conflicts that we could have had together because of his values, he was like, no, this is important, we are important, and the truth is important. And so before Jonathan, I was worried there weren't any other people out there who's actually willing to walk the path even when it was very difficult, even when there was something to lose. But these people are out there, and if you let go of the people who aren't right for you, you'll find the people who are right for you. You can spend your whole life trying to make people who don't like you a little bit, but when you change yourself that way, the people who actually like you, they don't find you, they don't see you because you're acting in a way that isn't yourself.
You don't allow yourself, like, open up to
The
allowing
universe is
yourself
not
to be who you are. You know,
the universe is not a it's not a scarcity situation. I want to say is that, of course, within reason here, don't quit your job if you're starving and you don't have food tomorrow, whatever. But even then, you never know. But just don't be worried that this universe is a scarcity situation. Give up what isn't right for you, and then see how what is right for you comes. And sometimes nothing comes and then you find out down the road that that was actually what was right for you, and you find a greater gift than getting what you want is you end up getting what you need. But don't think that this universe is a place where you have to settle. Please don't settle. Not unless you really want to. You can settle with certain things, but don't feel that you have to settle because it's a big world and energy attracts energy. Your vibe attracts your tribe. So trust that. That's been true for everyone I've ever seen, and it's been true in my life.
and that rings so true for us as well, Tobin, because I'll just be honest and say, like, last year, living in Denmark, I was like,
Yeah.
spiritual people don't even live here. I was like,
Yeah.
I was legit like, okay, in Denmark, everyone's pretty logical to a certain degree, and there's not too many spiritual people around. And that's just like, and then the fascinating thing that happened was that when I just, like, kind of let go of that idea actually, and just started being more open to, like, allowing my own, like, spiritual side to come out, and being more open to my, that is a value of mine, like,
Yeah.
uh yeah, connecting with people who are spiritual, that's definitely a value. And actually, when I started allowing that to be there, then all of a sudden we meet, and actually I met other people who are very, very spiritual and very conscious and very much on the path. And so it's incredible what happens when we can, like you said, let go
Yeah.
of our construct of what needs to be there, or settle on that thing.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it gives space for something else to come into our life,
Yeah.
like you, which I'm extremely grateful that you're part of my life too, Ben.
Yeah. Right back at you. Yeah. I wasn't sure there were anyone like you. So I was quite surprised. I was quite surprised when and the funny thing is the way we met was very weird for me because like this was really like I'd seen Jonathan write some kind of post on LinkedIn, and it didn't relate to me at all really. It was about internationals in Denmark. So quite far from someone who
So
was just
dang.
living in Denmark for their whole lives. But I wrote to Jonathan for some reason. I wrote to him if he wanted to make a collaboration, and I have no idea why. I didn't really know him that well. My first impression was of him was like he seems nice but a little naive. He's probably not that spiritual, and uh, and I had no reason to say that, but I did it anyway, and I still don't know why. And then when I talked to him the first time, I was like, holy smokes, this person is not at all what I thought he was, but he's exactly what I was looking for. But I didn't expect him to be that way at all. So it
And
all
you,
happened without me even really knowing what the hell was going on.
but you were trusting in your own, whatever was coming to you when you wrote that message. Because if you didn't write that message, if you didn't trust, then maybe we wouldn't be sitting here right now. And
When
that's it. That's
I wasn't really the one that wrote that message. That message was I'm not really sure what happened, but that was someone else was something else was going on there, and sometimes that happens.
I've got, like, this is a great opening right now, Tobin, because you often say that to me, And I'm often like thinking, like, I'm often confused at that. And I'm sure a lot of people listening in will also be a little bit confused when you say it wasn't you writing that, someone
Right.
else was writing that through you or something. Could you share with us, me and also our listeners today, what is that for you? How do you know when somebody else is writing through you, or can you explain that? Can you go and tell us more about?
Well, God will take over. God will take you over sometimes when you blink. In that moment where you blink,
Like,
he'll work through you. And I don't mean the Christian God, but I mean the whatever the bigger thing is. And I think actually everyone knows this experience. Sometimes you do something, and then afterwards you're like, "Wait, did I do that? Was that me?" Like maybe you say something, something erupts out of you, or you take an action or something, and you come back to it, and you're like, "That wasn't really characteristic of me." And it was as if something surged through you, and you did something. And everyone experiences this. That something happens, and then afterwards you're like, did I do that? And it always has some kind of effect of opening up your life. For example, you might be visiting somewhere and you see someone, and then you turn around and you talk to them, and maybe you're not the person at all who talks to anyone, some stranger in the line or whatever, but that it just happens spontaneously. You say something that you wouldn't normally do, and the conversation starts, and then you get a new friend, or maybe you end up dating, or a new opportunity comes. But the common denominator is that you don't usually do this, and you weren't completely aware when it happened. Something was working through you. And yeah, I actually think I think most people know that feeling.
can I share one experience of what
Yeah.
came to me, and then we can give you some more time to talk about this, because I'm very interested and curious into this. Also, in a way, because you trust it so much. There's little people that are in my life right now that trust that
Mm.
and follow that, or like let that kind of come through them and just go with it, kind of thing. Um, but I was in Italy, right? Uh, like with a in Denmark, you have this thing called højskole.
Right.
It's kind of like a well, if you're Danish, you know what that is. If you're not Danish, it's kind of like, yeah, it's a school that you go to after uh, yeah, when you're in your 20s or something, and it's pretty loose.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you get some cultural
cultural
learning.
stuff. And anyway, this one was all about food, and we went to Italy, and I don't know, I was just kind of by myself walking around, and I was at the like going over a train track, and there was a bunch of people, and the train had stopped, and the railway things had gone down, and it opened up to go. And normally I would just walk, right? But for some reason, my legs were so stuck that I was like I couldn't walk, and I thought this is very unusual. Like,
Yeah.
why can't my legs walk right now? And it was almost like something was holding them back or holding them down.
Right.
And then I just got this surge of like to turn around, and so I was like, okay, I turned around, and there was this guy, very unusual looking guy with long dreadlocks, and like he just it looked like he had been walking for weeks and hadn't showered or whatever. Anyway, he looked directly into my soul and gave me the most genuine, like deepest smile, like just so pure.
Damn.
and and we just connected with our eyes, and I looked at him. We might have stared at each other for like 10 seconds. It felt like a long time, whatever. But it was such a strong like thing that then uh, we just started talking, and then we ended up talking for like hours, and he shared all about his life. And he was an extremely spiritual person, and it was such like a signpost moment for me to be like, well, there was a lot of things that came up for me in that
Yeah.
conversation, but it was like this thing of like something was just holding me down, that I couldn't walk. because I had to turn around and like connect with this person, and then this magical conversation came up, and which was really another like many signposts in my life, but that was definitely a signpost to come back to the spiritual path, or come
Yeah,
like to reconnect with me and my yeah yeah. So that was my story.
that's
My
amazing. I
experience.
love that. I love that.
Yeah, but you were saying this with like we all experience that. How do we know that that's not us and that it's something else? How do we know that it's like, and then yeah? So can you tell us a
because
bit about that?
because it happens to us, and it happens despite us. It's not, it doesn't feel like, it's not a, it's not that you think about it and then you do it. It jumps out of you like a, it's like a joke that suddenly comes to you, and you just spurt it out, and everyone's laughing, they're dead laughing, and you're like, wait, where did that come from? And you're like, you didn't even, you have no idea where it came from, but it just came from like a spark from a flint. um so in other words, it feels qualitatively very different. It is spontaneous. It doesn't start with a thought and then turns into an action. It doesn't have a purpose. It exists because of, it exists for itself. The action is in itself enjoyable, and when the action is finished, you feel like something worthwhile happened. It's an authentic action, basically. And I think it's the universe, playing a little playing a little prank on you in some way or another. And often, as you mentioned, it opens up something, so a new path
Or something you
in
need
your
you
life.
needed to hear or needed to see or experience or
Yeah,
feel in that where you are in that life, that part in your life. Yeah.
and because of that thing, some people get stuck on clairvoyance and spirits and all these things, but that's sort of a detour. That's gotta be careful with that stuff. Better to let it happen when it happens.
Okay, so uh, how is that related to? That was an definitely an offshoot. It's a really nice offshoot.
Right.
Um, okay, so with this design of with values, we've got like people. What
So
else?
you get more of that, because as you
Yeah,
start to design your life around your values and that which gives you energy, you get more and more of these things
you
happening and these people coming, because now you're on the pathway of the right energy.
so you're energetically attracting those things in your life or those people. Can
Right.
I say one thing with that comes to me right now is like you're also putting your attention on that. So you're changing, maybe you're shifting your attention to wherever that is, to kind of okay, like when you're opening up to maybe a value or maybe a whatever it is. Actually, you're changing your way, what you're seeing in your environment, your attention.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in an indirect way, but it's kind of like when you now I'm just like, I don't know why I'm smiling right now. But it's like when you your friend gets a new electric car some
Right. Right.
and then you see that car all of a sudden all the time.
Right.
It's kind of like that in a way,
Yeah.
maybe indirectly, but
Yeah. Like attracts like, I think, is one of the hermetic rules or something. It's certainly a big rule of the universe, is that whatever you are, you attract. And so you better be your best self, because then that's what you attract to.
and you see that around you more often, or people come into your life, or
Yeah.
situations or experiences or signposts or different things come into your life that you
And another thing is, like, for example, Jonathan, you we came together for this podcast, and first we really we bonded and we made this podcast. First of all, it turns out I had the editing skills to do the podcasting editing, which is awesome.
which I don't have.
Yeah, and it turns out you had the cash to pay for some of the stuff we needed, which I don't have. And I'm this big idea visionary kind of talker, and you're like the concrete, let's connect it all together, let's come up with concrete examples kind of guy. So there's a lot of times where you're like, you're picking up the threads, you're saying, okay, but a totally new person, how would they understand this, how would they apply this in their lives? You complement me so well in these ways that it's quite clear that the universe has put us together, because energetically we have similarities, and energetically we have complementary situations and traits. Because the universe has made this match, it is very harmonious in many ways, and the ways in which it's not harmonious is ways in which that we can use to grow.
100%.
So when you let the universe play matchmaker, you're going to get some really good matches, and that's also why all those people you had relationships with which ended terribly or whatever, a lot of people is like, oh, it was the right person, it was the wrong person for me or whatever. My ex-girlfriend that I was with for 3 years, which is a long time for someone like me, um, we were terrible for each other, but she was the perfect person for me at that time. And I learned all the right things exactly that I needed to learn from her. She's not the person I was supposed to be with forever or for long, but she was perfect for me at the time because she gave me exactly the right kind of suffering that I needed to understand new things about myself and to become more conscious. So you always get the right people if you live according to your values and your honest desires. Even if your desires aren't the desires of an enlightened Zen monk or whatever, if you truly desire something, go chase it and then see what the lesson is. And if you authentically follow your values and your desires, you will advance on the path and things will get better.
The more you trust it, because it's quite easy to go off the path when you see other people around you living in a certain way or chasing some
Right.
of their own, like a cultural dream or yeah,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yawn on that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it can affect us. And then
Oh, it does.
and what we're talking about here is the opposite of that. What we're talking about here is actually connecting to yourself, your values, what's important to you, what do you choose as a person,
Right.
and whether that is in alignment with the culture or the environment that you're in or whatever, then that so be it. But what is important to you? How
Mm.
can you live more in alignment with that? Because that's
Right.
what brings you energy. That's what gets you out of the vicious cycles, the pain, the problematic behavior, the
Yeah. Yeah.
all the shit basically in your life will start to dissolve when you have enough like courage and keep listening to yourself, keep um,
Yeah.
believing in who you are as a person, your values, you know who that is, you know the compass, you know where you're going. And so you're able to kind of come from that place in spite of the fear, in spite of how other people around you want you to behave or want for your life. You can kind of come back to yourself and stand in that and be like, hey, this is important to me. I'm
Yeah.
standing for this right now because this is close to my heart, because this brings me joy, or this is important to me for my family or my future, or who I am,
Right.
and follow that and listen to that part of yourself. That's my rant.
That's so true. And you know what the right people do? They keep you on that path when you doubt. And when you get sucked in or when you lose your way for a while, the right people, if you've made a space for them, they'll put you back. Like I was talking to you the other day, and I wanted to discuss something with you because I was feeling astray about something. And by the time, and I was thinking about our conversation, I was like, well, I already know what Jonathan's going to say. He's going to tell me, why aren't you doing the thing that you feel is right? Why aren't you trusting yourself? So when I actually got around to talking to Jonathan, I was like, well, I was going to ask you about this, but I already know your answer. And I've already decided that I'm going to do what you were going to say. And then we talked about it a little bit. And then you said what I knew you were going to say. And then now I've been implementing it. And of course, everything just works better when you're in alignment with your values and with your energy. And so that's what the right people do. And you know what the wrong people do? They try to get you off the path for different reasons. Some people just don't believe in it. Some people try to get you to go astray because they think they're helping you. Other people truly enjoy to see you go astray because they're people who feel pain. And so they don't want you to succeed because they want you to stay down in the mud with them. It's not so prevalent in Denmark. In some places it is. But in some other countries where the consciousness is lower, there is a lot of people who are happy to hold other people down because that makes them feel as if they're not small, not compromising, not living their lowest self. So the right people, they will hold you up, and when you fall down, they'll help you back up. They'll keep you motivated, inspired, and they'll take you back on the path when you go astray.
And we all go astray.
We all go astray, and sometimes in the when we talked about the other episode about unconscious behaviors, sometimes you leave the path for a few years when you're young because you're chasing something else or whatever. And then suddenly you're like, oh shit, I have to. Actually, for me, that happened many times where I went astray and then I realized, oh shit, I gotta, now I got too much pain. Now we gotta start waking up again. So it's very common to go astray. And also, I wanna, the way I know the way I talk can sound very boisterous and impressive at times, but it's important for me to emphasize that I made all the mistakes when I was younger. I only became conscious because I kept coming back to it and I kept trying and I failed a million times and somehow at some point still found my way back on the path. It was in no way easy and it was far, far from a straight road. It was winding and bending and dead ends and backtracking and I don't know what. So I just want to emphasize that in no way am I a holy person for who it was natural and empty. I clawed my fucking way to this point, and I have all the respect for you if that's what you're doing because it's not at some point it starts to get easy, but my God, it takes a little while for most people before it gets easy. You
And we can
gotta, you gotta, yeah.
we can all relate to that. Getting in the dirt, getting messy, getting kind of shat on a few times, quite a few times,
Yeah.
or
The
just like
lotus flower grows out of the mud
yeah, and it's uncomfortable. It's painful. It hurts.
and feels meaningless sometimes. That's the worst. If it feels
Yeah,
meaningless, if you feel meaningless, just know, keep walking and it'll start to make sense.
just put one foot in front of the other. It's a
One foot in
community,
front of the other.
and you'll be there before you know it.
Yeah. And if you follow your values, you will be able to fall in love with yourself. And when you fall in love with yourself, you reach the greatest form of self-love, which is you forget yourself. And when you forget yourself, you don't have any flaws anymore. You don't have pride, you don't have humility. You don't find yourself anywhere. Nothing
Wait a
sticks out.
second. You forget yourself.
Right. Because if you follow your own values, some people might say, well, wouldn't I get a big ego out of that? But you get a natural self-love, you get a healthy pride in yourself, which it's just a vibe. You become more vibrant. But it's not like you go around and have all these ideas about how awesome you are and all the things you did. That's ego. When you follow your values, it doesn't make your ego bigger, it just makes you bigger. And the more you follow them, the more you don't even think about yourself in that way. You become a naturally vibrant living thing, which is has less and less self. Because following your values also mean to be authentic. And the more authentic you are, the less
The less pain.
the less conceited actions and ideas and understandings of self and ideology and philosophy and politics you carry around. You just become a spontaneous, natural being who doesn't think much about himself, but just or herself, but just exists and lives. So
And
even if
that's
you follow your values, you don't get a big ego, because true self love actually makes your ego smaller.
and values are usually quite close to your heart, which
They
bring
are your
you
heart, I think.
they are your
Probably.
heart. Yeah. Boom. When you were talking just then, that's what I was like, it was just coming to me like your values are you coming
Yeah.
from your, they're literally the deepest things
Yeah.
in your heart. Like that's so no wonder you feel true love for yourself when you live from that place.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is like the minds or the logical part of us can't always make sense of that. So
No.
when we're acting from that place, it will try and do everything it can to take us away from that,
Right.
to distract us or to kind of cloud that place and or rethink or overthink or no, you're not
Yeah.
doing the right thing or what, like, or fear or whatever. And so know that that's going to be there. Notice that and still act anyway. Still come from your heart. Still come from your
Yeah.
values, what's important to you. Because when you keep walking that way, that voice will get less and less. It will
Right.
still be there, and it might be loud sometimes, but you know that you don't have to listen to it. You can still hear it, notice it, and still act anyway, and still choose to do what's important to you in
Yeah.
spite of that.
And the more you tune into it, the more it feels like something deeper and truer than all the stuff that isn't it. All the thinking and all the impulsive emotional consciousness, all these things, they are not as deep as your values, as your as your true self.
And so the more you act upon this true self, the more you're able to discriminate or
Yeah.
distinguish between what is it and what is not.
Yeah. So really, if you're just don't see your values as a burden. It is a scale that if you measure yourself by it, you will only gain from it. Just don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah,
Remember that
that's
the
the
way
other
to
thing. Yeah.
the only way to ever achieve anything is to fail forward. Just fail 1,000 times and then you start to get there. Failing doesn't mean you're defeated. Failing means that you're actually trying and making progress. On the spiritual path, failing is everything. There is no other way forward than just failing and failing and failing over and over and over again. That is the mark of progress. It is not the mark of defeat. The mark
Failing
of defeat
can,
is if the mark of defeat is when you don't try.
there's so much truth in that. How many times in my life have I feared something and not tried, hesitated and not gone for it, and never known?
Yeah. And
And
one
I'm
thing you
not,
can ask, one thing you can ask yourself if you have the courage for it, but I tell you it's worth doing it. If you ask yourself right now, is there anything in my life that isn't in alignment with my values? Is there a way in which I'm not living right? If you ask yourself that question, if I ask myself that question, I don't get anything that is out of alignment. And that's because I've worked for it so long. And it's also because there are certain things that I'm in doubt about what the hell my values is in this situation. But my life right now is exactly the way I want it. I'm not saying that every circumstance is the way I desire it to be, but there are certain things out of my control. But everything I choose to do with what I can do is in perfect alignment with what I want to do. And that's a pretty great feeling. And some of those things comes from being courageous and doing things that you want to do. But some of the things also just means to recognize there are things you just can't do. There are things that aren't possible. Like I have an illness that means I'm tired a lot of the time. And I can't keep my apartment as clean as I wished. If I really love when my apartment is clean, if I could, I would clean it 2 or 3 times a week so it was spotless all the time. I can't do that because that's simply not possible with the energy I have to distribute and the other things that I want to do and have to do. So I've given up on that desire because it's not feasible and there's no other way to fix it. So it's not just to be courageous enough to do the things you want to do. It's also to recognize what is actually possible, what is actually feasible, and of course, never ever talk yourself out of something that is possible. Never use this in a bad way and say, "Oh, I can't do it anyway." That's not what I mean. But recognize your limitations. Don't suffer because of something that you can't really change anyway, because that's also a way to find peace in your life, is to accept what you can do and to accept what you can't do. Because we will, no matter how in tune we are with the universe, limitations are a part of this life. We will all experience limitations,
And
and
this,
they will stop us from doing certain things, and that's okay. Your values are not how your life ends up, but how you live the one that you have.
and that's a pretty key part, is giving space or making room for accepting some of these limitations.
Yeah,
And at the same time, when we are stuck in areas in our life because we think it's not possible, like also questioning that, those thoughts coming into ourself, and realizing that there is so many possibilities.
yeah,
As a human being, we are capable of so much. We're
right,
capable of so much, in fact, that if we knew what we were actually capable of, I think a lot of people wouldn't even leave the house
yeah,
because of the power that we have as a human being, and the power we have when we're able to connect to this source of vibrancy, of like, I can't put a word around it, but everything that's the energetic life force that is within us all, this, and our values that are a big part of that. When we're
yeah,
able to kind of come from that place, and with a bunch of other things as well, but that's one part of it,
yeah,
then so much is possible in our life, and so much can open up for our life in different areas, and especially with the people that are like, we've talked a lot about people today. So
yeah. And I want to say that when I started the conscious path, when I started to work as a therapist, and when I did many other things in my life, I didn't believe what I was doing was possible. I didn't believe it was going to happen, but I hoped it was possible. And because I hoped, I thought to myself, and this goes back to the metaphor about the funeral and the 90-year-old living in bed or whatever, is I knew that I was going to regret the hell out of it if it turned out that it was actually possible and I hadn't tried it, just because I didn't believe it was possible. So in this life, there's only one way to find out if something is possible, and that is to try.
to go out and
So
do it.
try it, do it. So I'm saying, and this is so key, because so many people will be limited by this. Just because you don't think it's possible, if there's a hope in your heart, if there's a light in your heart, if it makes you happy and you smile thinking if it could happen, then try it anyway. Again, walk the path with shaking legs, tremble, but just walk it and see what happens. See what happens.
Because life is too short to not take that action, to not know. Life is too short to get to the end of your life and regret the things that you hadn't done because of fear, or
Yeah,
because of uh, that part of us holding us back. When we knew deep down what was important to us, what we knew deep down in our heart, what did we want to do in that moment,
yeah,
and we didn't follow it. So you have a choice in every moment to follow that part of you, to follow your values, to follow what's important to you, to follow your truth and choose that, and just go for it in spite of all the other stuff that's saying otherwise, in
Yeah.
spite of everything else, to just let that go and just show up and choose that walk and just take one step after the other.
And the first step is the hardest because then at the second step, you already took one.
Yeah.
And the first day is the hardest because the second day, you already went through uncertainty one day. So the hardest part is the first time, the first day, the first step, the first hour, the first week, because everything becomes easier once you've been in that discomfort one time. And every time you choose fear, your world gets smaller. And every time you choose what you wish was possible, what makes your heart dance, if it was possible, your world gets bigger. And if you listen to fear for too long and you chase comfort, then your world becomes so small that even the comfort you have doesn't comfort you anymore. So the path of fear leads nowhere. It's not a place you want to go. And the path of courage, well, it may be dangerous, you may die, but at least you'll die being alive. Because if you don't, then you'll be dead already long before they put you in the grave.
So you have a choice today. Do you choose fear, or do you choose the path, your values, what's important to you? Do you choose to walk that path and to grow as a human being, or to let your life be small? Or do you choose to expand it and to be who you really are?
See how big it can get. One day, you fill up the whole universe. And I think that's probably the episode for today, Jonathan. What do you think?
I think that's a wrap. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys, and have a good day/night.